So we've hit 2 o'clock. We're going to get started with our webinar here on the farm programs, the decisions, and the tools available. Again, my name is Jonathan Koppas with the University of Illinois. I'm joined by
Nick Paulson, also at the University of Illinois, and Minnesota native as well.
Native son of the great state of Minnesota. We thank you guys for tuning in. And we will get started. What you see on the screen in front of you, you should have the split screen here. And we're going to walk through the toolbox in a minute. But we want to first just make sure everybody has some background information on the programs and the decisions that farmers have to face. So we're going to start with that right now. Before we go too far, we always want to take a minute to note the other institutions that are a part of our ongoing effort to provide this resource for farmers and landowners. Everybody here you see has been involved in the process of developing this, as well as the education and outreach that goes along with it. So we appreciate their assistance. And I would note the University of Minnesota was a key partner in the dairy margin protection program aspect as well. Website information, the Farm Bill Toolbox, which you see on the right. You see that website. That is where, like we said, that's kind of our one-stop shop for all kinds of information, from articles and short summaries to video clips to as well as webinar series. And then that FSA.USAPAS website, that is the Agriculture Policy Analysis System. That is the online calculator. What we're going to do is walk through the 3 sets of decisions that we have for this Farm Bill, and what we've created over here in the Farm Bill Toolbox as the kind of 7 steps, decision matrix to go through those. So we'll get started. Just note right off the bat, these decisions are one-time, irrevocable decisions. When they're made, when those deadlines below close, the decisions are irrevocable for the remainder of the Farm Bill. And these are made on an FSA farm by FSA farm basis. So it is entirely likely that many farmers will be dealing with multiple FSA farms in the decision process. We note the deadline of February 27th. That's the current deadline that FSA has put out for updating payment yields and retaining or reallocating base acres. And then the program election decision, that ARC county, ARC individual, and price loss coverage. That decision deadline, as noted by FSA recently, is currently March 31st, although they have left themselves some flexibility to move that back if they need. So start with step 1 here. For each FSA farm, we note that they sent out a letter in August that will tell you the base acres, the yields, and the acres planted, the historical acres planted that go into this decision process. The other thing that farmers will need are their yield histories from 2008 to 2012. Crop insurance records will be accepted for that. And then here you see as we go through this, we'll keep lining up the decision steps and the slides here. Nick, you want to explain the letter a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess the slide, again, on the left-hand side of your screen right now includes a snapshot of the part of the form letter that was sent out the end of July by FSA to all producers and landowners. Farmer landowners should have received that letter at some point in August. That is something that they hopefully did not treat as junk mail, something that they kept. It is a very important piece of information. Again, on the top left-hand panel, it's just got the first paragraph of that form letter. And then the table at the bottom just gives you a look at what the information looks like for a single FSA farm that would have been in the letter that this producer would have received. So this would have been a farmer operating in Ward County, North Dakota. Information for FSA farm number 12. It's got all of the commodities for which there is currently base acreage established on that farm. So in this case, barley, wheat, and canola have base acres on this farm. It has the current base acres listed there under the 2014 base acre heading, and then it has the current program yields, which are labeled as the 2014 CC or counter-cyclical yields. So those numbers are important as producers do the yield updating and base acre reallocation steps. Those are numbers that the producer or landowner can keep, or they'll have the alternative to look at other options for updated yields and reallocated base. So the biggest thing with this letter, and now we've just kind of focused here on, again, the table of data for any given FSA farm. Producers should be going through, reviewing this, making sure that the data that is listed is correct. As far as they know, that the acres listed are the numbers that they've certified. The base acres look correct. The program yields look correct. Because that information is what will be used in again the payment yield updating decision and the base acre reallocation decision.
Yeah, just a reminder as we go through this, if you have questions, type them in, and we'll try to get to them as we go, but we will also save them here on the screen for Nick and I to answer as we get through the slides. So certainly if you have questions, don't be shy. We'll jump into step 2 here. So also kind of coming out of that need to collect the information. Step 2 in our decision process, as you see here on the right-hand side with the Farm Bill Toolbox then, is the decision to retain or update the payment yields or the program yields that are on that FSA farm. Note first and foremost that this is the landowner's decision. The owner of that farm, of that FSA farm, makes this decision. It's pretty straightforward, pretty basic. It's whether you keep the current yields as they're listed in that FSA letter, or you update them to 90% of the yields from 2008 to 2012. So for this one, the cropping history is going to be important. Again, crop insurance records will be accepted by FSA, as well as a pretty significant list of other information that they will permit. The regulation basically says that this will be a self-certification by the landowner when they go in, subject to spot check and audit. So while you don't need the cropping history at that moment, you do want to make sure you have it on hand. And we also want to know that this is a crop-by-crop decision. This means that you can update payment yields for one crop and not another. The other part of this is it is independent of the base acre decision or the program decision. You make these as separate independent decisions for the farm, and for the payment yields, it is crop by crop. And basically the decision is pretty simple. If 90% of that 2008 to 12 average, if 90% of that is higher than your current payment yield, you're going to want to update that payment yield and get the higher yields on the record books. What we have here then is a quick example, and I'm going to start off. This is the Agriculture Policy Analysis System. This is the online calculator, and we've got one of the components of this tool that are available is a quick calculator for this. And so, Nick, let's walk through this. We've got an example. All apologies to Minnesota. We've got an Illinois example for now, but certainly this will work the same for Minnesota. So what we're entering here, Nick, you want to walk through what we've got? Yeah,
so while Jonathan's entering the crop and the yield numbers here, we've got, again, a Champaign County, Illinois example. The reason why the county and the county matters here is because there is a rule in place where at the county level they have what they're calling plug yields that can be used to replace very low yields in the yield history here for the yield updating decision. So you can see Jonathan selected Illinois Champaign County corn. The plug yield for that is 121.2 bushels per acre. So he's going through example number 1 where there was a history for yields in all 5 of the years in which they look at, 08 through 2012. The 2012 yield he entered of 107, and when he hit the calculate button, that was replaced by that plug yield of 121.2. If you pick a different state and county, you'd get a different plug yield. Obviously, a different crop, you'd get a different plug yield, but that's how that plug yield works. First example, we had yields in all 5 of the years. Example number 2, I'll just have Jonathan delete the 2009 yield and the 2011 yield. So this would maybe be an example of an FSA farm that the producer had in a corn soybean rotation. In the yield update calculation, if the producer did not plant that crop in that year, you leave that yield blank in the yield history for the update calculation, and that year does not get considered. So in this case, only the yields in 08, 2010, and then the plug yield, which replaces the actual yield in 2012, are the ones used in that average. So the updated payment yield here of just under 139 bushels per acre is an average of the three yields that were there, multiplied by 90%. There is a difference between not planting a crop in a year and obviously having a very low yield. So if you do have acres that were certified as planted to that crop, you do need to provide a yield. It can be the plug yield if you do not have the appropriate documentation to back up a different yield number. So example number 3, that's the case we're looking at there. You could simply enter, have Jonathan just enter a 0 there. And we got a little, how do we get the echoing out of here, Jim?
There, I got it.
Okay, so Jonathan entered a 0 there. Again, that means that we did plant corn in 08, but we don't have the yield documentation to back up whatever our actual yield number is. In that case, you are required to use the plug yield because a crop was planted. So there is a difference between not planting and that year being excluded from the average versus not having the documentation for a yield or having a very low yield, in which case the plug yield is used to fill that gap in the history.
Right. So just real simple. If FSA's got a planted number in that letter, there needs to be a yield for that year to do the update. So that's, again, the quick calculator in the APAS tool here. You can also do that in the custom farms, and we can get to that in a bit. But there's a quick calculator for landowners to use if they just want to do the payment yield update. Step 3 then is this base acre decision. It's also a landowner-only decision. The owner of the FSA farm makes it. This one involves all the program crops on the farm. This is not a crop-by-crop decision. You have to, if you're going to reallocate base, you have to reallocate for all program crops on the farm. And this is reallocation. It's not an update. It's a reallocation. So this means that the total base acres for that farm will not increase or decrease from this decision. The decision itself is merely to keep the current allocation or distribution of base across the program crops on the farm, or reallocate to the ratio of the 2009 to 2012 plantings. And note that is a different set of years than what we had for the payment yields. Payment yields are 2008 to 12. Base acres are 2009 to 12. And generally, we think that as you go through this, you probably want to look to increase the base for those crops that have a larger potential payment, that are more valuable in these programs.
Right, but again, it's going to end up being the choice between two options: the current base acre allocation, and we've pulled up that example letter here with the table for the North Dakota example farm. And then based on what is planted, certified planted in that 09 to 2012 history, there will be a reallocation option. It won't be a range of reallocation choices the farmer has. It'll be either your current base or your reallocated base. So it'll be a comparison of two sets of numbers once they enter in their planted acreage history. We've also got a quick calculator for the base acre reallocation. Again, based on that letter for any given FSA farm, Jonathan's going to go through and select all three crops for which this farm has existing base. So he's pulled down barley, wheat, and now he'll go and grab canola as well. And then the other thing you want to add here is any other program crops that have planted acres over that 2009 to 2012 period. So there's basin barley, and the producer planted some barley in 08. There's basin wheat, and the producer planted some wheat. But then the producer also planted some peas. And even though there isn't any existing basin peas, we're going to use that here in the reallocation, base acre reallocation calculation. So now Jonathan's entered the current base numbers, existing base acres there. Again, those are the numbers in the top portion of that table, the 25.7 base acres in barley, 112.6 in wheat, and the 8.7 in canola. And now he's just going to go through and enter in some of the planted acreage numbers that are in the history in that table. So had some dry peas in 2009.
2012.
And 2012. And then
Wheat.
Producer didn't plant any barley or canola from 09 to 2012, so it's just the wheat in 10, 11, and 12. And the 24.9 acres in 2012. So now he's entered the planting history. I think you got to also enter in zeros in the remaining boxes there. And then when we hit the calculate reallocated base, it's going to give you that reallocation option. So again, the producer here would be choosing between their current base allocation with some acres in barley, wheat, and canola versus the reallocation option, which would be the same total number of base acres at 147 base acres, but about 80.48 of those in wheat and 66.52 in peas. Doesn't matter if the farmer has been underplanting or overplanting their base, planting more acres than they have total base or fewer acres than they have total base. In that 2009 to 2012 period, that total base acres of 147 is the sum of the barley, wheat, and canola existing base. Your total base acres are not going to change regardless of what you decide, just the allocation across the crops.
Yeah, and just to highlight that point, the calculation here is the ratio of what you planted to what the base acres, or to all program crops on the farm. So that's where it does not matter if you're over or under planting. It's really the ratio of what was planted there, and that's how that calculation comes out.
Yep. So what this reallocation tells you is that I'm not going to try to do the math in my head, but a little over half of the 147 acres from that 2009 to 2012 period were planted to wheat. That's why you get a little more than half of the base allocated to wheat when you reallocate. A little less than half reallocated to peas because a little less than half were planted to peas over that 2009-2012 period.
So again, that's the quick calculator for landlords in particular that don't want to go through the entire build your own farm. That calculator will also exist within the build your own farm component of this tool. But we'll move on here to step 4. And this, we think, as you go through these steps, you want to start by comparing the ARC County program with the price loss coverage, the PLC program. And so step 4, back in the decision steps.
Should we go, Jonathan? We got a question on the base reallocation on what you do with preventive planning. So if we can back up to that table from the letter. So as you can see, what they've included here is planted acres, prevented planted acres, double, and then subsequent acres. I believe it's the top 3 categories that are included in that base reallocation. So obviously anything you planted, anything that was prevent plant, and then any double crop acres should be included in that number you enter for that crop in the calculator.
Right, and that's a great reminder that what you're plugging into the calculator is what is in this FSA letter, because that's what FSA is going to use to do that recalculation, which is why making sure these numbers are correct is very important to do. And the double crop, just to note that double cropping, you have to be in a county with approved double cropping in order to be able to qualify for that. So that is going to be only in certain areas. But yeah, that base acre reallocation comes directly out of the FSA letter. So whatever you see there is what you would put in.
Yeah, but the question was on prevent plant, and you definitely do include that acreage in the reallocation calculation, because I think the language in the bill is actually planted or intention, right?
Yeah, planted or considered planted. So it's the FSA terminology is planted or considered planted. So if FSA considered it planted, you're going to put that in there. And I think you see in 2010, the 117.28 here and the 22.5 of wheat gets you to this one. My math's not great, but I think that gets you to 139.7.
Right, it's the sum of the planted and the prevent plant on wheat.
Yeah, so it's a good question, but you treat these numbers the way FSA's got them in the letter. That's your key component there. So again, jumping back here to step 4, and as you see, we forgot to show this part of it, but obviously those decision steps, step 3 to retain or reallocate. Then we move on to decision step 4. And you note the information that's available here. Again, the parameters for this step, and we're looking at comparing ARC County, the county level revenue program, with the price loss coverage. So these decisions are a little bit different. So where the payment yields and the base acres were made by the landowners, the program decisions are made by all of the producers on the farm. FSA clarified in the regulation that what they mean by this is only those individuals who are considered a producer, which means they are sharing in the risk of producing a crop on that farm, and they have a right in the share of the marketings from that farm if a crop is produced. What that means in short is in a cash rent, cash lease situation, that landlord is not a producer on the farm because they do not share in the risk. So in a cash lease situation, it is only the producer that is making the decision, not the landlord. The other thing about the Ark County and PLC is this is a crop-by-crop decision. That means you could actually mix the two programs on the same farm on different crops. Here you see just the high-level overview. Ark County is a county revenue program. It's using the 5-year Olympic average of market year average prices. That's what MYA stands for. And the county yields, not the farm's yield. And then price loss coverage is the deficiency payment program, similar to the counter-cyclical program from the last couple of farm bills, that makes payments whenever the market year average is below a set reference price. Just stepping through that, here are the calculations for Ark County. Again, that 5-year Olympic average, and what we mean by Olympic average is you drop the year with the high and the year with the low. You multiply it by that market year average price. The market year average price is the same national price used for all programs. It's the 12-month marketing year. The average of the prices received by farmers weighted for sales and calculated by USDA based on information they get from the elevators. So this is the same price that's used throughout the programs, the market year average price. Note that in this benchmark revenue calculation, anytime the reference price, or anytime that market year average price is below the reference price for the commodity, you replace that low market year average price with the reference price. And anytime that the yields used, the county yields used, are below 70% of the T yield, then you replace it with 70% of the T yield. This is the transition yield calculated by crop insurance. And those are used in a plug situation. For Ark County, the benchmark, the guarantee is set at 86% of the benchmark. You calculate an actual revenue for the crop year. Your payment rate is the difference. However, it is not to exceed 10% of the benchmark. This means the program basically operates from 86% down to 76% of the county revenue using the 5-year Olympic averages. And then this one's paid on 85% of the base acres for the crop. By comparison, here's the price loss coverage program. Here on the right, you see the reference prices for all the commodities. And again, the payment rate is the market year average price. Whenever it's below this reference price, it pays the difference between the two, multiplied by the payment yield that you could have updated. Excuse me, and then that's paid out on 85% of the crop's base acres. So both Ark County and PLC pay on 85% of the base acres for that crop. And again, they can be mixed. So you could have one program on corn and one program on wheat, for example. For this one, again, we've got the decisions here. We also want to highlight that on the APAS tool, there is a sort of quick way to look at this. And I will jump into that right now to show the sample farms, which are simulated farms. And we'll show here. Nick, what's your home county?
I'm from Freeborn County.
Freeborn County.
It'll be a Borning County. It'll be corn and soybeans.
So just to show kind of what the tool's doing, you see here all the counties that are in that crop reporting district. You can compare the acres. As Nick noted, this is a predominantly corn and soybean county. We've got a little bit of sweet corn up there. What we do for the tool then is simulate a farm based on the historical planning information in that county. In this case, you see this simulated farm, this sample farm would have 378 acres of soybeans and 476 acres of corn. That is then ran through the model for the program calculations to generate estimated payments for that farm for all crops. You can do that on a crop-by-crop basis. You see it as the 2014 estimated payment as well as the average payment over the 5-year life of the farm bill. You can also then generate expected payments per acre by crop and compare the programs against, or for each crop against each other. Now, when we get into a crop-by-crop situation, the ARC individual drops out because it actually has to use all of the crops. So it is not an individual crop by crop. But this is the sample farms analysis that'll provide a fairly simple and quick way to sort of baseline, if you will, how these programs would work on a farm consisting of those acres. And so producers can do this by even thinking about how their farm compares to this kind of acreage on the farm.
Yeah, the other big thing on whether you're doing the full-blown build your own farm option in this tool or using the sample farm option is what's really critical in comparing these programs is what your price expectations might be for the next 5 years. So in the sample farm portion of the tool, we have 3 national, well-known, respected price scenario forecasts that producers can choose from. And it just works out that the latest projections from all 3 of these groups, one of them happens to be relatively lower price levels for most crops, one happens to be relatively higher price levels, and one kind of falls in the middle. So we've got price scenarios from the Congressional Budget Office for the 2014 to 2018 periods. Same type of set of projected prices from the USDA, and then as well as from the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute at the University of Missouri. We also have a set of their latest price projections. So when you're using the sample farm, those are the 3 sets of prices you can kind of play around with. And you'll see that the height of the bars there and the relative comparison of the programs in terms of how much support we might expect from these programs does differ. So USDA tends to be on the lower end in terms of their price forecast. So especially if we take a look at the 5-year horizon, the PLC program choice plus maybe buying some supplemental coverage, crop insurance tends to look a lot more favorable as compared to the Ark County option. But if you look at higher price levels, such as that CBO price scenario, you'll see that both kind of the annual average over the full 5 years, which is what's up there now, versus the 2014 or 1-year horizon, Ark County tends to look like the more favorable program for corn base. So again, just to emphasize how important the producer's kind of price expectations are, and just being kind of familiar with what you're looking at on the screen, what prices are being used to generate those, and how they change if you choose a different set of prices. And that's just an outcome of the way the programs are designed. They are programs that trigger when prices or revenues fall. So obviously, looking at lower price scenarios is going to change the expected performance of those over time.
Yeah, and that's a great point to remember. One of the key differences between Ark County and price loss coverage. Ark County is using this 5-year Olympic average. This will move through time, so you'll be always using the 5 most recent crop years, the market year average prices for that. So that will change over time. Whereas the reference price will not change for the life of the farm bill. So that $3.70 on corn is going to be the same reference price all 5 years of this farm bill. And kind of to Nick's point, what you see is that if you're in a really bearish or low price scenario, the Ark County program starts to change a little bit because of the fact that over the 5 years you're using lower prices that get incorporated back into this, whereas the price loss stays the same. So just kind of a different operation of the 2 programs. It's a key difference because particularly in Ark County's the last 5 years have high prices built into that, and that'll be in there for a few years as we go forward. So again, that sample farms is kind of a nice way to get a quick sort of side-by-side comparison of the programs and have an understanding of what they might look like in 3 different price scenarios, and allow producers to do so without any real data entry on their part from their farms. And that's Ark County and price loss coverage. We'll come back to a little bit of that in a minute. But first we want to move on to step 5 in our decision matrix here in the toolbox, which is the Ark individual coverage. So there's some basic rules or some basic differences of this program that we want to cover, which also help explain why we look at it separate from in a separate step in the Ark County and PLC. First, we note that this is all producers on the farm have to make this decision again. So this is a program decision for producers. So that same idea of sharing in the risk and not a cash lease situation. ARC individual deals with all program crops. Therefore, it cannot be mixed on the same FSA farm with any of the other programs. ARC individual is an all-in program. If you choose it, your entire FSA farm is in this program. It uses the actual farm level revenues and actual farm level yields, the same national market year average prices. You're looking at your farm yields and you're adding all the crops with base acres. Again, we're using a 5-year Olympic average, but we're adding those Olympic averages together and weighting them. Each individually are being weighted by what was planted in the crop year.
Right, and all that means is, again, simplest example would be if you had 50% of your farm's 50% in corn, 50% planted to soybeans. It'd just be a simple average of your corn revenue and your soybean revenue. If you had 25% in corn and 75% in beans, it'd be a revenue measure that was more weighted towards that soybean number because there's more acreage planted to that. But it is a combination of all crops planted to that year. That's how the benchmark revenue is determined. As well as the actual revenue. It's a weighted average revenue measure which incorporates all crops planted that year.
Right, and that will change year to year if you're doing a rotation or changing your planting mix. So it wouldn't necessarily stay the same all 5 years for that. We also just note that two other things to keep in mind about ARC individual. You are also not just adding across all crops on that farm, but you will be including all FSA farms that are in the state that are also enrolled in ARC individual. And so it could be in some cases where you've got multiple FSA farms enrolled in the individual ARC program. It's entirely possible you'll be adding those together as well. And finally, the big issue here is that it pays differently. It pays on 65% of all base acres for all program crops on the farm. Our county and price loss coverage pay 85% of individual crops base on the farm. This one adds all those base acres together and pays on 65% of that total amount of base acres. Here are the calculations again. We won't go back through them. We kind of covered this, that you're calculating each crop to get your benchmark. You're using the same reference and T-yield plugs. Then you're doing the Olympic average. Then you're weighting them based on the actual plantings in the crop year, and you do the same type of calculation for the actual revenue. That's ARC individual. Again, using the sample farms. If you go back to all crops, you can see ARC individual show up, and particularly you can see that comparison then on this sample farm in Nick's home county of corn and soybeans, how it looks in comparison to ARC county and and price loss coverage with the SCO here on top. But notice because you cannot use that on only one commodity, anytime you get out of the all crops, you will lose the ARC individual calculation there. So that's ARC individual, the third of the 3 programs. As we go back through our decision steps, we've got that listed as step 5. The next step in this process then we think is going back and considering the supplemental coverage option in crop insurance. So that's step 6, and this is different too. This is a crop insurance policy, not a Title I commodity support program. Nick, maybe you want to explain a little bit more of how SCO works and how that may look on the farm.
Yeah. So like Jonathan said, SCO is a crop insurance program. So SCO is something that a producer will be purchasing from their crop insurance agent. However, it is linked to the farmer's or landowner's commodity program decision in that only acres planted to crops that are using the price loss coverage program are eligible for this supplemental coverage or this supplemental coverage option. So the way SCO works is it has an 86% trigger or 86% coverage level. That is based on what happens at the county. SCO can get relatively complicated because depending on what the farmer purchases for their underlying individual plan of insurance, and that is required to purchase SCO, you need to buy some sort of underlying plan of insurance either through the yield protection plan, the revenue protection plan, or the revenue protection with the harvest price exclusion. So one of those 3 combo policies needs to be purchased first to be able to add SCO on top of that. Depending on what you buy for that underlying plan defines how SCO works. So SCO has a fixed 86% trigger, but then it actually provides a range of coverage that goes from that 86% down to the coverage level on your individual plan of insurance. So if you couple SCO with a 75% RP policy, your SCO range is from 86% of county revenue is how that's triggered down to 75%. Again, what happens at the county is what triggers payments, but the actual dollar amount or the indemnity that a farmer will receive is going to be based on the size of their insurance deductible or the size of their insurance liability. So farmers with higher APH yields are going to have higher values of their deductible or higher insured liability. If they're in a county that an SCO payment gets triggered, they're going to get a slightly bigger payment than another farmer in that county who might have lower APH yields and a lower liability. So what happens at the county determines whether there is a payment, and then kind of the size of that loss at the county level is applied to the individual farmer's deductible to get to that actual dollar amount the farmer will receive. If you couple SCO with yield protection, it's based on county yield. If you couple it with RP or RPHP, it's based on county revenue. So it mimics the policy that you're using as your underline. And again, it provides that range of coverage from 86% down to whatever your individual coverage level might be on that underlying policy.
So a couple key reminders on that. Obviously, you've got to have an underlying policy for that farm, for that crop on that farm. And it is the factor that determines how SCO is able to operate. And then that final piece is it's only available for those acres with those crops that are not enrolled in the ARC County or ARC Individual program, any farm with ARC Individual. So it can only be combined with PLC, or in the case of somebody that doesn't want to be in any of the programs, you can combine. You can just have PLC, or you can have SCO and your underlying coverage. So you don't have to be in a Title I program. You just cannot mix SCO with the county revenue or the individual revenue program. And if we went back over to the sample farm again, you see that show up in the calculations over the 5-year. So we also note that it's not available for the 2014 crop. It only becomes available for the 2015 crop. And then it's only available in those counties where RMA has the data. So there are counties in which SCO would not be available. But you can see this underlying coverage changing the SCO calculation as you go. So if we dropped our underlying down to 75, then you've got a different SCO payment here on that 5-year horizon. So just a couple of those notes on how SCO works. And then the big reminder again on the deadlines for this, you see here our base acre reallocation and yield update decisions. Those have already begun, and the deadline is February 27, 2015 for those landowners to make those decisions. So those decisions will close on February 27th. The ARC PLC, that starts November 17th, and it will run at least till March 31st, 2015, unless FSA pushes that back further, which is entirely possible. And then we also just want to note from a technical standpoint, there's a difference between the decision and the actual sign-up or contracts. You'll make this decision first, then they're going to have to go back in and sign the contracts to be enrolled in the program, and this they'll do every year. Once this election's made, once these decisions are made here and here, they do not change for the life of this farm bill. But in order to actually get payments, you'll have to enroll and sign the contract each year. So just kind of something to keep in mind as we sort out all the steps in this process. Going back into the Farm Bill Toolbox real quick, we'll show we've got the deadlines in there now. As we get closer to these deadlines, there'll be forms and other materials here to sort of download and print off and take into FSA after you've gone through the tools. So there'll be more in this step 7 as we get closer to the sign-up deadlines. But for now, we just have the deadlines there and the ability to make to run the calculations on the programs.
And I guess our guidance, other than the guidance on the individual steps we've gone through, but just in terms of making these decisions, we're not telling people to wait until February 27th and then expect to be able to go into FSA and have a nice, easy customer service experience. And but you don't necessarily need to make the decision next week either. Same thing on the program decisions. The more time that goes by, the more time that farmers and landowners have to educate themselves, to understand the difference between these programs. So that's really what we're pushing right now, I think, is for farmers to spend some time educating themselves so that they can make a more informed decision. The other issue with waiting, or the reason to, especially on the program election decision, to wait on that, is the closer we get to March, the more we'll know about how these programs are going to perform in 2014 and even in later years. So we just started that 2014 marketing year for corn and beans anyway in September. That 2014 marketing year average price won't be finalized until next September. That does run through August of 2015. So by the end of March, we'll have kind of the first half of that marketing year. We'll know what price levels have been. We'll have a much better idea of what that 2014 marketing year average price will be. We'll have better expectations for what the 2015 price levels might be. So, farmers will have more time to learn about these programs, and they'll also just have more market information available to them to help make that decision.
Right. And one of the challenges of this two-step decision process, other than the fact that the first two are made by the landowner and the last one by the producers, is the fact that the program choice does have, you're going to think about that a little bit for the base acre reallocation, because as you see here, this is where we're kind of saying if the program payments are going to be more valuable in one base acre than the other, then that does have an impact on the reallocation, or potentially could have an impact on the reallocation. So again, the sample farm capability is a good way to be able to help inform this decision for the landowner in that case. Finally, here on this APAS tool, we do have then the capability to do the data entry to build your own farm and be able to run the programs against your farm as it exists. And really, this gets to be some data entry, so we're not going to spend a lot of time walking through it. It's pretty intuitive, and for producers, you're just entering some basic information for your farm, and it will take you through the same kind of setup that you saw before. And you see, if we just had an FSA farm here with 100 base acres, and we got the potential to do the reallocation again. We have 100 there, and we'd just be here's where you'd be entering your actual information that we went through already. And I don't know that we'll do some numbers real quick. Nick, anything we want to add about how this is going to work?
No, I get it. As you walk through this, it's got the payment yield update piece that you're seeing now. It's got the base acre reallocation piece. Again, there's quick calculators available for both of those for landowners who don't want to enter in everything. But this build your own farm option is kind of the full-blown version of this tool, where if you sat down with your individual farm information, you could go through and add it in. The nice thing about the build your own farm piece of the tool, it does require a little bit more information from the farmer, some more time spent sitting down and entering that information. But on the price side, we've made it possible for the farmer to enter in their own custom price series. So there still are the three options: the CBO price series, the USDA prices, and the FAPRI projected prices. But the farmer can go ahead and select a custom option and change those prices to whatever they think their longer run price expectations are. Again, Jonathan's going through this pretty quickly, but all he's done so far is entered in some of that historical planted acreage, historical base information that would be in that letter, some of the historical yield information you'd have to use and want to have records for the payment yield updating. And now what he's doing is just setting up three different scenarios so that the user could say, all right, I got this really simple FSA farm in our case with 100 base acres in corn. Here's my historical numbers for planted acreage, my payment yields, go through all those things. Now I want to compare how these programs might work. So scenario 1, he's got it set up for Ark County. Ark Individual is in scenario 2, and price loss coverage is scenario 3.
Yep. And one thing I want to note here, this button right now, what this will allow you to do is to actually save the information you've entered for this FSA farm on your computer. We do not save this information anywhere centrally, but the farmer can save it on his or her computer, and then all the way back at the beginning, and there's an option to upload one you've already created, so you can come back and rerun scenarios based on a previous and do a comparison that way. But there is a way to save this information so you don't have to always re-enter every bit of it.
So in the coming months, as we learn more about prices, the farmer could come back. None of their historical planted acreage numbers are going to change. None of their yield history numbers are going to change, but they could come back and load that information up and run some different scenarios with some different prices to compare the programs, just to see how sensitive those are to some of the price changes we might see.
Yeah, and again, you just see the same kind of setup here of expected program payments. Now these are based on what was entered for this build your own farm throughout, and then run through the modeling effort. One final thing we'll note in this tool, and then take some questions, that farmers, another resource within this is what's called the safety net analysis. It's available on the sample farm as well as the build your own farm. And what it does is look at a revenue target type analysis. So let's say for my 100 base acres, I thought I wanted to be in the $60,000 range as a revenue target. Well, you can compare then the odds or the probability of reaching that $60,000 on those 100 base acres if there are no programs involved, with scenario 1, which is Ark County, with scenario 2, which is Ark Individual, and with scenario 3, the price loss coverage. And you can compare then the sort of odds or the probability of reaching that revenue target in those different scenarios. So just another way to look at the analysis here, another way to kind of compare the programs on the farm. So with that, I think we've run through the information we have. Certainly happy to take any questions or even take some requests for some other counties or other areas if we wanted to look at some slightly different crop mixes. I know Marshall County, I think, makes a good example for some other crops. Here we start to see a little bit of barley and a kind of different crop rotation with wheat. And so then you start to see our expected program payments. Again, you can kind of see how these compare. And again, a big part of this, as I'm sure you guys understand and farmers will, is sort of how these Olympic average calculations for the crop compare to that price loss coverage reference price. So you see a pretty good reference price for barley in there, makes a difference against that 5-year as opposed to corn. And so just a couple kind of components as you look through this, or as farmers sort through this, some different ways to analyze it. And with that, I think maybe we'll open it up to questions if you've got any. Just type them in now and send them our way, and we'll do our best to answer them. And I see we've got the prevent plan on the yield calculation, not the base acre calculation. So we were certainly, if you don't, again, that goes back to if you do not have a planted acre for the crop, then you don't have a yield for that crop, and it's not included in that. I believe you're talking about the payment yield calculation. So if there's no planted acres, there are no yields for that, and that would not be entered in that case. You'd leave it blank for that year in which you were prevented planted. That's be 100% prevented planted on that.
Right. So I know at home, in southern Minnesota, we had a real wet spring last year. Had a lot of prevent plant acres. So they're just, on some of our FSA farms, we just wouldn't have had a corn yield. Ended up having to plant some soybeans, where we, had originally planned on planting some corn. So in terms of yield, I mean, that would have been 2013, not 2012, so it wouldn't matter for the yield update calculations. But in a year like that, where you've got some prevent plant acres, the prevented plant crop would not have a yield for that year. I mean, there were not acres planted to that. So, I ended up putting some cover crops down or whatever. That year just would not enter into the history used for that payment yield update calculation.
Right. So with that, we've got a little more time. Are there any questions that anybody has about the programs, the decisions, or these online resources we've got available here for landowners, producers, for yourselves, for pretty much anybody that wants to see how the programs are going to work anywhere in the country? Those are certainly available. But if you got questions, send them our way now. Otherwise, we'll close up shop and let you get on with the rest of your day.
You must have done a really good job, Jonathan.
Are there payment limits?
Limits, all right.
That's a great question, and we thank you for asking that. There are payment limits. So payment limits are a little bit different this time than in past farm bills. We have what is a $125,000 per individual payment cap across all programs. So two things that need to be noted on that. Number one is that let's say you've got price loss coverage on one crop and you've got Ark County on a couple other crops. If they trigger payments for all those crops, they are added together. So it is a $125,000 cap for all those payments. What it also includes are any marketing loan gains or any loan deficiency payments through the marketing loan program. Those will also be counted against that $125,000 cap. And just also to note, producers with spouses that qualify will have a double cap that will have $250,000 for the combined couple. Also, in that same vein, I want to note the adjusted gross income eligibility requirement. That is different from the past as well. This time around, we have a single $900,000 AGI, adjusted gross income for the farm, for the individual. That is based on a 3-year rolling average of what's been reported to IRS, your taxable income. If it's over $900,000 on a 3-year average, you are ineligible for payments in the year that it's applied. So those two things are slightly different, but we do have payment limits and an AGI requirement for these programs. Now, one thing to note also is that the supplemental coverage option, the SCO crop insurance program, because it is crop insurance, it does not have a payment limit, and there is no AGI eligibility requirement for SCO. So AGI and payment limits only apply to the Title I programs, the marketing loans, the Ark County PLC, and Ark individual programs. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Well, seeing none, we welcome any questions you guys have down the line. If you have them, certainly send us an email or register in on some of the other webinars. Again, we're going to hold a webinar every Friday morning, at least through the remainder of this month. And then we'll be looking at other dates as we get close to the deadline. But we welcome you registering there. And if you have farmers or producers or landowners with questions, please refer them to the Farm Bill Toolbox. If you don't want to remember that website, you can go and jump on your favorite search engine like Google and just type in Farm Bill Toolbox. And it should be one of the first things that pops up. And that'll take you right into the home page for the site and all of the information that we went through here today, as well as links to videos, webinars, past webinars. You can link straight to the APAS tool that we were looking at. Also note that when you're on the home page of the APAS tool, there is this link that'll take you into the Farm Bill Toolbox. So the two sites are interworking and interlinked in that regard. But we encourage you as producers come forward with questions and look for information to send them our way on the toolbox. And certainly this sample farm is a nice way to kind of give them an idea about the programs without getting into a lot of data entry or too much information about their farm. It's a good way to just give them a sense of it. So we want to thank everybody for joining us here this afternoon. Not seeing any other questions, I think we'll let you go. Thanks again, and hopefully we will get a chance to work with you guys again in the future. Take care and have a great afternoon.